They'll be moving into your house next month, Mom announced. Perfect, I'll start packing this weekend, I said. The next morning, I called a realtor. I-29F was always the family safety net, but never the family priority. My entire life has been one constant reminder that my brother Mason 32M was the golden child while I was just there, the invisible daughter, the reliable backup plan, that is, until I decided I was done being anyone's plan B. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment when something inside me finally snapped. It wasn't when I overheard my parents telling my grandfather that Mason needs the inheritance more because he struggles with stability while Michelle will always land on her feet. It wasn't when they missed my college graduation because Mason had a softball game. It wasn't even when they borrowed $5,000 from me to bail out Mason and his wife Vanessa after their third financial disaster in 2 years. No, it was the casual way they served me up as a sacrifice, like I wasn't even worth consulting. Growing up in the shadow of Mason was just my normal. While he got the newest PlayStation, I got the hand-me-down console with the sticky buttons. When Mason made the JV basketball team, my parents rearranged their work schedules to attend every game. When I made honor roll 4 years straight, my mother taped the certificate to the refrigerator for exactly 3 days before it was replaced by Mason's C+ in English, his first passing grade that semester. Mason just needs more encouragement, my mom would explain when I'd ask why they never came to my debate competitions. You're so self-sufficient, Michelle, you've always been our little adult. Little adult, code for we don't have to worry about you, so we don't. Despite the constant backdrop of emotional neglect, I pushed forward. While Mason dropped out of the state college they'd paid for in full after just 3 semesters, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through school. I earned scholarships. I graduated with honors. I landed a solid job at a financial consulting firm and slowly worked my way up. By 27, I had saved enough for a down payment on a modest 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every mortgage payment, every repair, every piece of furniture, all earned through my own hard work. No family loans, no parental cosigners, just me. Meanwhile, Mason and Vanessa bounced from one disaster to another. He cycled through jobs like seasonal allergies, present for a few months, then mysteriously gone. Vanessa's shopping addiction didn't help matters. Neither did Mason's brilliant decision to sink $10,000 borrowed from our parents into a cryptocurrency that was showing promising early returns. Through it all, my parents kept enabling him, and occasionally when their own finances grew strained from supporting him, they'd turn to me. Just a small loan, my father would say. Mason's going through a rough patch. Those small loans, $500 here, $1,200 there, never got repaid. I kept a spreadsheet. Over 5 years, I had loaned my brother over $15,000, money I knew I'd never see again. My aunts and uncles noticed the pattern. At family gatherings, the comments would start innocently enough. "So generous of you to help your brother out again," my aunt would say, eyebrow raised over her wine glass. "Family should always stick together, right?" My uncle was less subtle. "Must be nice having a sister with deep pockets," he'd say to Mason right in front of me. Some of us had to figure things out on our own. Still, I kept showing up. Sunday dinners, holiday gatherings, the occasional weeknight dinner when Mom would call and say, "It's been too long since we've seen you." I'd arrive after a 10-hour workday to find Mason and Vanessa already there, feet up on the coffee table, helping themselves to the beer I'd brought last time. Then came the dinner that changed everything. I arrived at my parents' house on a Thursday evening in October, exhausted after closing a major account at work. The smell of my mom's lasagna filled the house, my favorite, which should have been my first clue that something was up. Mason's car was in the driveway, along with Vanessa's leased BMW that they definitely couldn't afford. The dinner started normally enough. Mason dominated the conversation with tales of his latest business idea, house flipping, because apparently watching HGTV had made him an expert. Vanessa showed off her new purse, which probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. My parents nodded enthusiastically at everything they said. I was halfway through my second glass of wine when my mother cleared her throat. "So, we've been talking," she began, glancing at my father for support, "about Mason and Vanessa's situation." My stomach clenched. Here it comes, I thought, another loan request. I mentally reviewed my bank balance, calculating how much I could spare without dipping into my emergency fund. They've been having such a hard time since the landlord raised their rent, my mother continued. And with the baby coming, wait, baby, this was news to me. Vanessa hadn't mentioned being pregnant. So we figured out a solution, my mother finished, her voice breezy and light. They'll be moving into your house next month. You can take the smaller bedroom or move back in with us temporarily. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. My stomach plummeted like I'd just hit the first drop on a roller coaster. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to say they were joking. No one was laughing. My house, I finally managed. It makes perfect sense, my father jumped in. Your place has 3 bedrooms. You don't need all that space for just yourself. Plus, Vanessa added, already scrolling through her phone, I found the perfect nursery furniture set that would fit perfectly in that front bedroom with the bay window. My bay window in my house that I paid for. This way you won't have to worry about maintaining such a big place all by yourself, my mother said, reaching over to pat my hand. It's really the most practical solution. They weren't asking, they were telling. They'd made this decision without me, as if my home, the one I'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford, was community property, as if I were community property. In that moment, something inside me finally snapped. The last thread of obligation severed clean. I forced a smile. Sure, that makes sense. When were you thinking they'd move in? The relief around the table was palpable. My mother's shoulders relaxed. My father nodded approvingly. Mason and Vanessa exchanged victorious glances. We were thinking the first of the month, Mason said. That gives you about 3 weeks to get things organized. 3 weeks. They were giving me 3 weeks to surrender my life. Perfect, I said, taking another sip of wine to hide the tremor in my hands. I'll start packing this weekend. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. I nodded at appropriate intervals, smiled when expected, and died a little inside each time Vanessa mentioned another piece of my house she planned to change. When I finally got into my car to drive home, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. Tears burned hot trails down my cheeks. I pulled over after a few blocks, unable to see through the blur of rage and heartbreak. I sat there, engine running, and screamed until my throat was raw. Then I took a deep breath, wiped my eyes, and made a decision. If they wanted my house so badly, they could have it, but it wouldn't be the way they expected. My company had offered me a promotion 2 months earlier, senior consultant, with a 35% salary increase. The catch? I'd need to relocate to our Chicago office. I'd been hesitating, unwilling to move away from the family that, despite everything, I still felt tethered to. That tether had just been cut. I called my boss at 11:30 p.m. that night. I'll take the Chicago position, I said without preamble when he answered. That's fantastic, Michelle, he replied, sounding surprised but pleased. When can you start? How soon do you need me? Well, the sooner the better. The Hawkins account is floundering without leadership. 3 weeks, I said firmly. I'll be there in 3 weeks. The timeline wasn't coincidental. The next morning, I called a realtor, not the one my parents knew, but a woman from the next town over. I listed my house at a competitive price just slightly below market value to ensure a quick sale. The photos went up on Friday. By Monday, I had 3 offers. By Wednesday, I'd accepted an all-cash offer with a 21-day close. The timing was going to be perfect. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. To my family, I was the compliant daughter, preparing my house for Mason and Vanessa's arrival. I mentioned getting rid of furniture to make room for the nursery, which explained the moving boxes and packed closets. I asked about paint colors and curtain preferences. I even invited Vanessa over to plan the space. She walked through my house like she already owned it, pointing out where her sectional would go, which walls she'd paint, how she'd rip out the vegetable garden I'd lovingly tended for 2 years because it's just not my aesthetic. Every condescending comment, every entitled assumption made it easier to go through with my plan. Meanwhile, I was methodically dismantling my life in preparation for my escape. I transferred to a new bank, leaving just enough in my old accounts to avoid suspicion. I secured an apartment in Chicago, signing the lease electronically. I redirected my mail to a P.O. box. I sold what furniture I couldn't take and packed the rest into a storage unit under a different name. 3 days before closing, I took a business trip that was really a flight to Chicago to finalize my apartment setup. I came back long enough to sign the closing papers, collect my cashier's check, and load my remaining possessions into a U-Haul. On what should have been moving day for Mason and Vanessa, I was already 300 miles away, settling into my new apartment with a view of Lake Michigan. I stood alone in my new living room, listening to the unfamiliar city sounds filtering through the windows. My phone buzzed incessantly on the kitchen counter, calls and texts from my family. I imagined the scene unfolding back home, Mason and Vanessa arriving with their moving truck, perhaps my parents there to help, all of them standing confused on the front lawn as strangers carried furniture into what they'd thought was about to be Mason's new house. I pictured their faces when the new owners explained that yes, they'd just purchased the house from Michelle. No, she hadn't mentioned anything about family moving in. Yes, the sale was final. No, they didn't know where she'd gone. I let myself enjoy that mental image for a full minute before silencing my phone and unpacking my first box. The calls and texts kept coming. My mother's voice messages escalated from confusion to anger to tearful pleading. How could you do this to us, to your brother? Where are they supposed to go now? You need to call us back right now and explain yourself, young lady. Please, Michelle, we can fix this. Just tell us where you are. After 2 days, I finally responded with a single text. The same place I was supposed to go, I guess, figure it out. Then I blocked their numbers. It wasn't just my immediate family I cut off. My cousin Melissa texted, "You've always been jealous of Mason. This is a new low, even for you. Uncle, your grandfather would be ashamed of your selfishness. Aunt, your mother hasn't stopped crying since you pulled this stunt. Is that what you wanted?" One by one, they joined my blocked list. Each deletion felt like shedding another pound of dead weight I'd been carrying for years. 2 weeks into my self-imposed exile, my former colleague Jen texted me. She wasn't close with my family, but close enough to have heard the gossip. "So, your brother and his pregnant wife are living in your parents' basement. Your mom's telling everyone you had some kind of mental breakdown, just thought you should know." I didn't respond, but I didn't block her either. Jen became my occasional window into the world I'd left behind. A month later, she texted again, "Remember that crypto thing Mason was into? Apparently he'd put in a lot more than anyone knew, like a lot more." That didn't surprise me. Mason had a talent for doubling down on bad decisions. What did surprise me was learning he'd convinced my parents to invest their retirement savings in the same scheme, promising them guaranteed returns of 40% within 6 months. When the cryptocurrency took its first major dive, Mason had panicked. Instead of cutting his losses, he'd borrowed money from 3 different payday loan companies to buy the dip. He'd also maxed out 2 credit cards in my parents' names, cards they didn't know existed until the collection agencies started calling. By month 3, the situation had imploded completely. The cryptocurrency was revealed as an elaborate scam. Mason was facing potential legal trouble for some side hustle related to the scheme. My parents had taken out a second mortgage to cover his most pressing debts. Vanessa was threatening to leave him, pregnant and all. I felt a twinge of sympathy, not for Mason or my parents, but for the unborn child being dragged into their chaos. I sent an anonymous gift card for a baby supply store to Vanessa's mother's address. It was the only concession I made to the guilt that occasionally bubbled up. My new life in Chicago was everything I'd hoped for. My job challenged me in ways my old position never had. I made friends who knew nothing about my family history, who saw me as the competent, confident woman I was rather than the perpetual afterthought I'd been. 6 months after my escape, I received a letter forwarded from my old P.O. box. The return address was my grandfather's nursing home. Inside was a short note in his shaky handwriting. "Michelle, I heard what happened. Your mother tells a different story than what I suspect is the truth. I always knew you were the strong one, the smart one. I'm sorry I let your parents convince me that Mason needed more help in the will. They said you'd always land on your feet while he needed a safety net. I see now who really needed protection. I've changed my will. It's not much, but it's something. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Love, Grandpa." I cried for the first time since leaving, not out of sadness or guilt, but because someone in my family had finally seen me. 9 months after my departure, Mason and Vanessa's baby was born. A girl. They named her Michelle, which Jen told me was Vanessa's idea of extending an olive branch. I sent another anonymous gift, a savings bond that would mature when little Michelle turned 18. Attached was a note, "For college, no strings attached." I might have been done with my family, but I wasn't heartless. That baby deserved a chance even if her parents were disasters. Around the 1-year mark, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Michelle," it was my mother's voice, tentative and small. I said nothing, just waited. "Please don't hang up," she rushed. We need help. Your father had a minor heart attack last month. The medical bills, and Mason and Vanessa and the baby are still living with us. We can't, we're about to lose the house." My old self would have immediately started calculating how much I could afford to send them. My old self would have felt responsible, but that wasn't me anymore. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, my voice steady. "I hope Dad recovers quickly." "That's it," her voice cracked. "Your family is falling apart and that's all you have to say? What would you like me to say, Mom? That I'll bail everyone out again, that I'll give up my life to fix problems I didn't create?" The silence stretched between us. "We're your family," she finally whispered. "No," I replied, "you're Mason's family. I was just the backup plan, the safety net, the one who would always land on her feet while you poured everything into him." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Who told you that? Does it matter? It's always been the truth, hasn't it?" She didn't deny it. "I have to go, Mom. Take care of yourself." I hung up and blocked the number. That evening, my company offered me another promotion, this time to our international office in London. I accepted without hesitation. The distance felt right. The night before my flight, I sat on my Chicago balcony with a glass of wine, watching the lights reflect off the lake. I thought about the girl I'd been, always hoping for approval, always willing to set myself on fire to keep others warm. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that real family doesn't drain you dry and call it love. That boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. That sometimes walking away isn't giving up, it's finally allowing yourself to move forward. I'd lost a family but found myself, and in the end, that was the better trade. I raised my glass to the Chicago skyline, to new beginnings, to the power of no, to the unexpected freedom that comes from finally putting yourself first. My phone buzzed with a text from my new London flatmate confirming my arrival time. Tomorrow would bring a new city, new challenges, new opportunities to build the life I deserved. My family had expected me to be their eternal safety net. Instead, I'd become my own. They expected me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. Instead, I walked away and built my own fire, and I was never going back to the cold again.